Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's okay. Hope everyone's good. Given last week on Tuesday and on Friday, I either didn't click the go live or I didn't turn my mic on. Let's just do a mic check. Make sure everyone can hear me okay. Once you do, I'll continue. Whilst we're waiting for that, given we're going to talk about any confusion that's been caused around... perfect, Chris. Thank you. People calling when Bitcoin top's going to be. Little poll there. Appreciate any interaction you have with it. Basically, we're thinking it's 4-year cycle and Q4 2025. I put half, that should be H1, not H2. I was thinking first half of 2026 and I've got them written H2. Apologies there, because I was going to do Q2. But anyway, 2026. Has it already peaked? I did get someone in my messages thinking that it may have peaked already. And then, or are we just up only? So any interaction or thoughts you may have, we'll have a look at that when we come back to discuss it later on. What are we going to talk about tonight? Well, someone in the Discord asked me to have a look at a new fresh take on when Bitcoin's going to top. And it kind of got me thinking about cycle tops, predicting them and the confusion that can cause, particularly if you have your own opinion on where that is. So we'll have a little bit of a discussion about that. I have finally got round to answering some other questions that I've been promising for a few weeks. We're going to have a look at tiny bit of news headlines, mainly just whether or not the US government is going to shut down and what that can do to the market. We'll check out Bitcoin's price. We'll check out things like dominance, altcoins, Tau, you name it. And then we will go from there. As always, any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I've only got about 3 or 4 preloaded, so hopefully we can keep this under an hour. And to do that, let us click that there. I'm not sure where that's disappeared to. Okay, here we are, Bitcoin. For those of you that did have a look on Friday, we were just hitting that 109,000 level. And we were talking about it needing to hold here before bounce, and it's done that incredibly well. Obviously, this is a 3-day time frame. It has wicked through, but the actual candle closed itself right back on this level of support. We talked on Tuesday, multiple confluences, talking about sort of 109,500, 600, 700 kind of level being a very serious support level. What have we done since then? We've bounced from it. Nice strong bounce from there. Kind of found ourselves just flirting under 114,000. Had a little bit of a pullback today, but that has been recovered. Although I do expect potentially some more volatility as the hours tick away on whether or not the United States are going to have to close their government. We'll talk about that in a moment. What is interesting, and you can't see because my head's in the way, Bitcoin dominance actually on the rise. And you can kind of see by just even looking at the right-hand side of my screen where we've got the list of all the altcoins. Yes, everything is down today. Bitcoin's down less than 0.5%. Most altcoins are down 2 to 7%. And that has had an impact on Bitcoin dominance. Being said, Bitcoin dominance has been steadily rising now for the last 2 weeks, and we're up 2% from its lows of 57%. We'll get into Bitcoin dominance and where that may take us later on, but this was the line that I was originally interested in, which we broke. I wasn't around to take advantage of it, and I've been sitting on my hands waiting for it to break 57 and then 55, thinking that 57 to 55 2% move would be an ideal opportunity to get out. We've actually started to bounce from that, which is kind of maybe glad that I didn't sell what Bitcoin I was willing to sell. But now, what is this? Is this just a Kobo before we then see further falling? Or are we going to actually see a bit more of a Bitcoin climb before we turn into that Altseason? We'll check at that later on. Total 2. We had that fall below 1.61 trillion. We've actually retested that over the last day or two. But as I say, altcoins have struggled today and we've seen that sort of fall away. I did have a line drawn on here. I'm not sure why I got rid of it, but it was sort of connecting these tops here with the wicks and sort of these candle closes from December of 2024. Nice meat of opening and closings in and around August and early September. And I think this is a fairly good level of support right now. We certainly don't want to be closing below it for any particular length of time. We may struggle to get back above it. But as right now, we bounced from that. We've got 4 hours, 5 hours to go from today. And then we'll have a look at that next candle closing. And then unfortunately, we have to look at BitTensor. I want this to be strong. I really do. But it's not really showing the strength at the moment that we want from it. We're going to spend a bit of time looking at, because I know Bijan wants me to have a look at it from a Wyckoff point of view, which we can do. But, the 315 Gandalf line, we've lost that one. We actually then sort of Kobo'd off it today with a move back down. We're now below this yellow trending line as well. We haven't quite taken out the low from June right now, so that 287 is kind of our last bastion of hope. But we start losing that, and then we're going to have to start to consider some fairly sharp and aggressive falls back down. I will accept that there is some license that you could do with this line to try and connect maybe wicks rather than bodies. And you do that, and it kind of potentially presents a little bit of hope. So I'd just say that as we stand right now, that $300 level is kind of in the region, the bottom of this channel. Whether or not it looks like it's ever so slightly below it, let's give it the benefit of a doubt. So, sidestepping now may not be the best position to do, because we have seen historically strong bounces from here. And so I'm just sitting on my hands, got myself into this position. Let's just wait to see how it plays out. And we'll have a look in some lower timeframes a little bit later on. Okay, I'm not going to go into the whole debate about government shutdowns and sort of the reason that happens. But ultimately, as you know, we've talked about government shutdowns over the last 4 years that I've been doing this, probably 7 or 8 times. But effectively, the US government needs money to pay for all of their services, particularly, armies, librarians, state police, federal police, whatever. And they need that money to be approved. And instead of I can see why they do it, not giving themselves an unlimited amount of money. But back in July, when Trump brought out his one big, beautiful bill, they effectively gave themselves to $41 trillion worth of debt before they'd need to have a look at that again. Well, that's fast upon them. And if they don't find a new way to magically create some money by today, then effectively the US government goes on strike. They close, they shut down because they ain't getting paid. What's happened previously? We've seen a lot of the sort of 11th hour negotiations, and then suddenly finding the money from somewhere. There was an occasion a couple of years ago where it actually did shut down for a week or so, which seemed like the end of the world. And I'm sure for the people living out there that were wanting to be paid, it actually was, or certainly felt like it. But the market's generally just sort of moved on, yet we might have had some volatility in and around it. But once everything reopened, it was back to business as usual. And so, look, they've got till midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, I believe. So they've got another 9 hours or so to sort of thrash it out. And despite the Republicans having the majority in both the houses, I think, I'm not totally in favor of it all, they do need bipartisan Democratic kind of sign off, and effectively, from what I can gather from the few snippets, there's some sort of posturing and negotiation in and around sort of healthcare bills and all of that kind of stuff that the Democrats want to take into account if they're going to sign off on a funding bill. So, well, let's see how that happens. But what is interesting is, poly markets loves to just take a bet with something. Early on today, the chances of the government shutting down 74%. But we go on poly markets right now, and we are at 85, which obviously you'd expect it to go up the closer we get to the deadline without any agreement in place. But it seems like a very high possibility of that. I'd just say, look, by the time we wake up in the UK, not only will we have had an answer, but we'll likely have seen the shake that it ultimately causes. Granted, the markets in America will be closed. So we may have to wait till 2:30 tomorrow to see how they react, but we're certainly going to see it from the futures and where we may end up going from there. But I would hazard a guess that even if they do, or they can't get an agreement, and ultimately it's not going to be indefinitely, they will get round the table. Whether or not the Republicans have to eat a bit of humble pie and take on some concessions that they don't want to, we'll wait and see. But yeah, that's got a lot of talk over the last 48 hours. Something that I missed, I don't want to spend too much time on, but just such a backward step for the UK. This came out a couple of weeks ago, and we think about what the United States are doing, excuse me, in terms of trying to progress cryptocurrency and regulations and stablecoin and everything else. Well, the Bank of England, who, by the way, are unelected, they've just decided to come out and think, well, you know what we're going to do? To protect our citizens, we're actually going to set a cap somewhere, we need to work it out, somewhere between £10,000 and £20,000. And that'll be the limit that any individual can hold in stable coins. They've actually also asked for some further feedback and consultation on lowering that limit to £5,000 per person. I don't want to get caught in a sort of big brother digital ID kind of discussion, but for those of us that are based in the UK, potentially quite alarming in terms of where we may be going. How enforceable that's going to be, I'm not necessarily too sure, particularly with, you know, how we can hold things, moving them to different wallets, and just the amount of time it would take to police that. The only thing I can really think is going to be is it's just going to be harder to on-ramp money, because maybe they will then be able to capture how much is going in and try and find out some sort of way to sort of convert that. And then likewise, either through tax returns or, you know, some avenue via the HMRC to retrospectively fine us, I suppose, if we hold above that. It is just a sort of a proposal at the moment, but it does seem that in our best interest, the HMRC are trying to limit our ability to move away from the fiat currency. So yeah, another own goal there, sadly, for the UK. Right. I'm sure there's plenty of other news, but we're not here really for that. So let's just have a look at Bitcoin, 12-hour time frame at the moment, what's happening. And, you know, in the last week, so Tuesday, we were here. And we talked about that 109,680 level, linking it to this 109,600 level back here, thinking it was the most likely level we were going to head back down to. And if we couldn't hold it, taking out this liquidation heat map zone here. Well, this has worked again. Quite a treat in terms of holding it. So we dropped down Thursday, Friday. I mean, give me a little bit of leeway. Again, this fib has been on this chart for over 18 months. So we've slipped below it, you know, by, I don't know, $500 or so. But in the grand scheme of things, we've pretty much hugged that line there. We've then found some strength over the week, well, at the back end of the weekend yesterday, and we've made that move back up. And we are now sort of having a look at retesting, re-challenging maybe some of these liquidation zones, 117,000 and then into the 120,000 kind of level. We've talked previously about 117, 118 being sort of a really significant point of control. And I think that is something that we ultimately need to sort of attack, consolidate on above, and then make our move through here. But we'll look at it in the later charts. But even this move back down here, you can kind of see there has been some sort of double bottom there, and what I particularly like about that, and I appreciate it's not the easiest to see because everything's in the way, but you know, this right hand side of that W formation, double bottom, whatever it would be, it is higher than what we had at the beginning of September. So you know, showing that yes, we have pulled back, but we've seen some strengths, and buyers have stepped in not to make that low. So for me, as things currently stand, particularly I was going to say enjoyable, but a good picture, certainly better than where we were over the weekend. Obviously we were up sort of nearly $4,000 since then. But moving ourselves into that period of strength as we end September, historically a poor month, but as we can actually see on here, not done too badly. I mean, barring a monstrous collapse over the next 4 hours, probably going to finish around about 4% up, which is down on what it was this time last year. But as I said, over the month of September, a fairly good month. And then, yes, we'll talk about it more next week. Let's effing go, because it's October tomorrow, and then that's it. The journey to Valhalla actually does begin. In terms of just big picture, you know, you're probably bored of seeing this, but really this is my major indicator of where we are. Still above the 20 EMA on the weekly time frame for Bitcoin. Haven't breached the 50 EMA. Haven't closed below it. We're still in a bull market, and I will, you know, that's the hill I'll die on, I suppose, in terms of, you know, defending that. I think that's a very sensible, big picture kind of identification for just what am I actually looking at here? Am I kidding myself? Well, as long as we keep above these two lines, blue and red, certainly the red historically for Bitcoin, it is showing that we are in a bull market. Yes, I accept to lose it and close below. We will give a lot of our gains away, and maybe there are other things we can use to refine that. But if I was put in a coma for 6 weeks and I woke up, first chart I'm going to look at for Bitcoin to try and understand where we are would be this one here. So things are looking particularly good. I'm just wondering, it's hard, obviously, I can't really draw a fib from bottom to top because we don't know where the top actually is. But I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do from the previous top. I mean, so that went from 69,000 all the way down to the bottom down here. Okay, I drew it at 16. It probably should have been 15. But, we can kind of see that actually the extended fibs, the 1.414 level, is pretty much where Bitcoin has actually peaked. And we've seen us sort of retrace and pull back to that. Now, I can't unrule out 102,000, shall we say, back down to this level. But as we stand, that is still above the 50 EMA. So if we did, as painful as that would be, still class us in the bull market. But the fact that we've hit this level, we've come back and we're using this 20 EMA quite nicely as a crutch at the moment, gives me some sort of confidence that, we're building up for that next move up. Let's just close that. Anything else on this one? I don't think so. Okay, so we'll drop down into things that were later on. And as I alluded to, look at the news articles. September's not even finished yet, and we're already talking about how amazing it has been. A rare September gains defies history, and I mean a clickbait title because I'm one of them. September historically the worst month in record, but I mean the previous two closed green, and this one obviously closed green. So we've got 3 in a row at the moment. So perhaps we're just trying to draw that in. But I love the fact that it's now a 50% chance that Q4 can rally to 170k. I didn't even bother to look into why that was there. But obviously, whilst I am optimistic that October is a thing, I just don't like seeing too many articles like this where it's just a surefire thing, because we know that we may get wobbles into that. And I'll get onto it later on. But some of you may have seen this on Twitter. I'll let it play in the background whilst I talk over it. But this is looking at, it looks like it's looking at the Bitcoin's 4-year cycles, and it is going to break all of those down for us as we're looking at. The point I'm trying to make, and I'll show you on a seasonality chart in a moment, is that we are coming into a time where Bitcoin historically has always performed well. Q4 of any year, I mean, there are some bear markets which it hasn't worked out. Q4 has always been strong for Bitcoin. So we have a look at the light green color, mint color, I suppose. Oops, what's happened there? Okay. Kind enough to put this chart here as a still. We come to October. This is the 2023 bull run. Huge move upwards. 2017, October. I know it had already moved, but look, October started that banana zone, that massive stride up there. And then we get into 2021. Yes, we've already had a peak, but even when we get to October, bang, moves up. Bad September, but we still had a very strong October. Now, it was slightly shorter than the others, fair enough, but October has always been that good start. So we are moving towards that. And if I use this seasonality chart, it's a pitch deck from something I'm going to talk about a little later on, but just by coincidence, they've kind of extrapolated every single month for Bitcoin's history into a chart format. And you can kind of see where October starts. I think I can actually even draw on this. Okay, where October starts up here, really poorly drawn, we start to see that move up. And that's an historic representation of where things are. So September we see generally tracks down. I know this month has been different, but then October into December. And what is even more interesting from that is when you actually look at Bitcoin over its history, and we get rid of, nope, that didn't actually get rid of them. There we go. And we look at this. Bitcoin is fairly concise with a 3-month period of growth here. And then actually we can see January, February, and March is another historically 3 months growth. Now, I would say that that's just one 6-month period, and then we have 6 months of ranging. And that data kind of suggests that it backs it up. Of course, within that 6 months over the summer period, it does generally move upwards. But the big moves seem to happen in this 3-month period and then in this 3-month period. And I think the reason we probably talk about them in 2 separate periods is because actually you could argue Q4 is really a 2-month period and December actually tracks down. So maybe that's where it is. We get October, November, it moves up. bit of cooling off in December, and then we see the rallies continue through the beginning part of each year. So, going back to the topic of sort of where we think we're going to top, whether it be early 2026 or late 2025, there's certainly arguments to be had in that. We're going to talk about those a little bit later on, but we can see from the seasonality, things are looking generally quite good as we move into next month. My running hobbies taking over my screen again. Okay, fear and greed. Well, on Friday we were down at 28, but that weekend rally has seen some relief and we've moved up. And it just goes to prove the point for those of you that did watch on Friday. Buying in the fear has never been a bad thing to do. So I opened up a couple of longs Thursday and Friday, and I just felt comfortable that we were in a position. One, I had some entries I could get into, just Solana and Bitcoin. But buying that fear seems like the right place to do it. And they are, I'd appreciate this is not an indication of price, but the fact of the matter is that Friday was actually the bottom from the fear. It took about another 24 hours for that lag to kick in before we started to move up. But the move up we have gone and done. Doesn't mean that we can't return to that. I completely accept that. But the market seems to have had a nice little refresh in terms of fear and greed. And then we're just coming back into the norm. Now, again, if we put this on the max, what I was kind of talking about is this time in the cycle, getting down to 28 is kind of unheard of. We did it in 2021 after the fall away from the April high, but then we gained our confidence and we came back up. And when we were looking at sort of like September's, I suppose we were down at 33 then. October, I kind of get it. Here we go, 2nd October 54. So kind of where we're sort of finding things at the moment, and then that move back up. So I think we're positioning ourselves in a relatively good way for the move to happen. Why do I say only relatively good? Because it's crypto. Well, actually, it's just trading in general. Nothing is absolutely cast on guaranteed. We can have a look at the canary in the coal mine, and yet we've had a couple of days of miner selling from BlackRock, but the vast majority of them have been buys. I did go on to, I must have deleted it. There is about 1,200 BTC from the BlackRock ETF that has been sent to Coinbase. I'm assuming that's been sent to sell. That was today. So we may see, anywhere around 110, 130 million of sales get registered tonight. We'll have to just wait and see on that one. But we've kind of seen where the price, that's already, well, hopefully will have already been factored in within this price right now. We're almost back at 114,000. That was something I wanted to actually do. Sorry, when you see it like that, you remind yourself. So just on this, I can't remember if I posted it or not. Maybe I didn't. Let's get rid of these now. Don't need them for now. What I was just trying to allude to was some sort of I don't know, you could maybe drop it down in lower time frames, but I'm just thinking, just for this move up, we're talking about Friday, was if we can just get above this level here, so 115,000, get that move up, consolidate there, that's fine. Until we get there, this could just be another move up, which ultimately ends up getting rejected, which is not what we want to see. So yeah, we're hopefully looking for a little bit more of an oomph and breaking it through. But when we were talking about this over the weekend, we have moved already a nice amount. So that's just from a very small time frame, perhaps one of the levels we're wanting to have a look at that hasn't really appeared beforehand. Right, where are we? Okay, sorry, Cliff just put ITN news at 6 tonight. Chap loses £250,000 of BTC in a phishing scam connected with alleged data brief. That was his pension pot. I know. Well, sadly, I'm sure that's happened to countless people. And yeah, 250. I mean, a couple of BTC just gone, just like that. Gutting, really. I'm not on Ledger, so and I can't say that Trezor, is guaranteed to be safe, but I think the experience that we have in the community, the security tab, and just generally people harking on about it, I think we are quite conscious of security and data management. Touch wood, doesn't mean that breaches and silliness can't happen. But just to reiterate, we put in all this time and effort and money into trying to better ourselves. So just having that sort of second double check, just to make sure whatever you're doing, wherever you're sending something, whoever you're engaging with, or whatever you're connecting your cold wallet to, you're happy to be doing that. So don't get complacent, because as whoever this gentleman was, or person, should I say, on the news, within seconds it can be gone, all that hard work wiped away. So yeah. Okay, right, perfect. Right, couple of questions then. So Sally asked the first one. I'm sure she didn't mind me naming her here. And Sally sent me a DM with a podcast from The Real Vision, which is Raoul Paul, talking about his views, his company's views on when the Bitcoin cycle top will be in. And it's different than what I perhaps discussed, and she wanted my opinion on it. So I've gone ahead and watched it. I've actually watched it a couple of times. The talk itself, which is this one here, it's the Everything Code update, which you can find on Twitter and you can also find on YouTube. It's about an hour and a half long. And before we go into it, I recommend you watch it. I honestly do. Particularly if you're one of the people who in the poll that you think is the top's going to be in sometime next year, I think you watch this. I think this is going to provide you with a lot of data that may help, may help assuade any confusion or doubts you may have, because they talk about the top actually happening next year. And whilst I don't necessarily agree with the outcome that they provide, and we'll explain that in a moment, just the hour and a half, just sort of the way they go into sort of understanding Bitcoin. Some of it I kind of had a look at myself. Other things I'd never really considered before. And honestly, I watched it twice comfortably. I wasn't even bored the second time. It was a very easy watch. I think the information they provided was common sense. I don't necessarily think a lot of people are talking about some of that at the moment. So well worth a watch. I'll post a link in Discord as well. I don't normally watch a lot of Raoul Paul stuff. I'll raise my hand and say that. But they've been around in the space for a very long time. Yep, they've had some wild views on price action in the past. And whilst he doesn't necessarily go into price predictions, just more sort of the timing side of things, I've taken on board everything that he said. And I think that's the thing that I probably want to start with is, we all have, however we've got there, we all have our own opinions on when or where we think the top is roughly going to be. I am very much a 4-year cycle advocate. Until that's proven wrong, I don't see why I should move away from that. There are those that think that it's going to be sometime early next year, and we're seeing sort of an ever so slightly extended cycle. There are those that are thinking we're just going to see more of a plateau until the money printers turn on towards next year, and then that gets fed into the economic system. And so we're talking late 2026 before we start to see that sort of final blow off top. And then there's always those that think that it won't ever break down, but we rely on those for our exit liquidity. So, you can go on and you can have these views, and sometimes you end up hearing someone like me talking about a view which is different to yours. And it can lead to some confusion, because you're like, well, I respect the argument that they're putting forward. They've obviously put a bit of time and effort into researching it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, as in you, when you listen to someone else talking about it, maybe my thought process behind why I believe it's going to be something different is wrong. And then it leads you to doubt yourself. And then you can tie yourselves up in knots. And I think the real point there is nobody knows. Absolutely nobody knows. I don't care how good your data is, and I don't care how long you've been in the industry. Nobody actually does know with any certainty. And you've just got to accept that. That's what we're here with trading about. We are dealing with uncertainty every single time we fire up our laptops, computers, start looking at charts and considering price action. We don't actually know which way it's going to go. We have methods, we have tools that can try and aid our probability of understanding which way it's going to go, but anything can actually happen. And once you have that mindset, I think it's a lot easier to take on board other people's data. And so, I get sent stuff every week. People ask me to have a look at and give them some sort of feedback on it. And, doesn't necessarily have to be on cycle tops, but using that same sort of analogy, I have my view on where the cycle top is. As I've said, 4-year cycle. But I can take on board what other people are saying, and I can either accept it, but still side with where I am and just sort of park that whatever I accepted in the background, or I can outright dismiss it and think, well, I understand why you've come to that conclusion, but I don't agree with you, and this is why. And I just try and always separate the two out, I suppose. I've got my view, and my view will be that view until, as I've said, till it breaks. I don't see any reason to move away from that. Or until someone puts up such a compelling argument that actually I am able to just write mine off. But I think it's healthy that we constantly attack our views. And again, I hope Alan doesn't mind me mentioning, but on the trading pub last week, he was talking about how he's a big bag holder of BitSensor, but he wants to, red team BitSensor every week or every fortnight. He wants to not look at any positive sides of it. He only wants to look at the negative sides to just see if he's still the right side of this trade, if you will. And I think that's a completely healthy thing to do. And I've reached out to Alan, said I'll happily support him in any data-driven information that I can help provide. And we take it from there. But I think that's how we should always play, even exiting the market. And I'm sorry if that's taken 5 or 6 minutes just to get to that point, but I think it's just a healthy thing to remind yourselves. Absolutely have your belief of where you think things are, how you think things are going to turn out, but don't be so pig-headed that you can't take on board any other information. Now, if you are the type of person that you worry and you take on your information that overwhelms you, consumes you, and you want to change your mind, fine, I accept it. You've made a decision, you don't want to take any on. But if you really want to up your trading ability, or your ability to withstand being in a market as volatile as this, I do encourage you to just always listen to other viewpoints, because as I found out watching this everything code, there were so many other data sets that I hadn't considered, which were just definitely interesting things for me in terms of how Bitcoin has worked historically in the past. So why is this different? Why am I ultimately talking about it? So well, I've got some charts here and I don't know where they've disappeared to. So I'm a 4-year cycle kind of maxi, I suppose. And that is 1 year down, 3 years of up, with the final year being a parabolic blow off into a bear market. And I've talked about these cycles the last 6 weeks now. It's not the same as the Bitcoin halving cycle that just happens to happen on a 4-year. This is more linked to what people I suppose would call the debt cycle, the overall global debt cycle of 4 years. People link it to the presidential cycle because it happens to also tie in with the election of US presidents, and they serve 4-year terms. And it's worked like that, where we still have these ebbs and flows within the markets that kind of happen every 4 years. And to be fair, Raoul, I don't know where I've put it. Oh, I know why. Here. This is the pitch deck that he provides with his talk, so you can download that and go through it. Although it is, there's no words backing up. He's just lots of charts on the screen, and he even agrees that everything is cyclical. Sorry, frozen then. Cyclical, and certainly has been since 2008, although the data goes back a lot further. And he's not disputing that. He was very much debt cycle, 4-year cycle kind of views. And as he goes through the deck, you can kind of see here is in red the 4-year sin curve that he ultimately uses, and you can see he's using it with ISM, so ISM. I think it stands for the Institute of Supply Management. Okay, and basically, I'm going to try and in 30 seconds because I don't have time to go through it all. The US sort of reaches out to business managers, owners once a month, and they ask them basically how the company's doing. Are you taking on orders? How is sort of hiring and firing? What are the costs of goods and production? How's all of that working? And they effectively put it into an index, which when you look on Forex calendar, it's the PMI. So you can actually see this week, by coincidence, tomorrow, we have the ISM manufacturing PMI, and then we have the ISM services PMI. So they're the two differences. You get manufacturing and you get services. And real sort of long story short, once they take all that data in, they collate it, tabulate it, it comes out with a score, and it's out of 100. And effectively, anything that is above 50, you can deem it as the economy is growing. Anything below 50, the economy is shrinking. And I appreciate there's a lot of nuance to it, and you can go into a bit more detail, but just you want to sound intelligent in the pub and someone asks you it and you know you can get away with a 15-second answer, that's all you really need to ultimately say. So he starts looking at it from the ISM point of view. As in the score of the ISM, you can see that in black at the moment. You can sort of see it ranges sort of, I know, the lows in the sort of low 40s, kind of peaks at the sort of mid 65s, and we can see that cycle there, and it kind of ties in with a 4-year curve. And that's worked really well since 2009, global crash. You can kind of see on the right side, my cursor disappears on this, annoyingly. So you'll just have to imagine it. But as you follow the red line up and down, it works. But then when we get to the right-hand side of the black, suddenly we get to 2024 and we've gone flat. And ISM has stayed historically, well, not historically, has stayed low, hasn't peaked up as we would expect. And that's why we felt so much ranging through 2024 and into 2025 with Bitcoin's price. And so just out of the blue, he comes up with, well, this time it's a 5.4 year cycle. And he goes on to say that, look, we have elongated this. So effectively, don't worry it. We are just going to range a bit. If you haven't felt your Altseason pump yet, it's because everything's moved to the right ever so slightly. And it's going to be farther later into 2026 that we're actually going to see that sort of strong move up. Now, he talks about it in a lot more detail and goes on. I suppose, whilst I understand how we got to this position and a lot of other data that he provides, it is when he just sort of comes out of the blue and says we've now moved it to a 5.4 year sin curve. And I don't remember him explaining why it suddenly jumped from a 4-year to a 5.4 year. And I suppose it feels to me like we're just data curving that to make it work, to make it look better. Whereas I would rather just be like, look, if I can get this to go back up, we haven't exactly seen this move yet, and maybe my cursor's not there, so it's pants without a cursor on it on the screen. I'm trying to use my hand. You can kind of see it now. And maybe we just see this strong move up and a sharper move back down, and it will still fit within that 4. We've got to do a whole cycle. So for me, it's where are we when we get back down to here? Have we gone up and down within the 4 years, rather than it having to follow this line the whole way around? So I completely get what he's saying, Sally, and as I say, it's a very interesting talk, which I please recommend you all to watch. But just because I don't really understand how we've got to that 4.5 year, and as I said, I watched it twice and I still didn't quite understand it. I'm just going to say, look, that's probably data curving. And I get to sit in the benefit of, let's get rid of this now. I get to sit in the benefit of, if we get to the 31st of December 2025 and we haven't seen Bitcoin's price massively fall away, as I pointed out, when we see that blow off top, we see aggressive falls away. If we haven't seen that, well, that's fine, because because I talk about it every week, that my real indicator, of course I got rid of that, is waiting for the 50 EMA, waiting for it to cross below the 50 EMA. So, if I get to the 31st of December and we're still well above the 50 EMA, I'm not going to suddenly sell. I'll just wait to see how that goes along. So I personally have the benefit of, okay, my model will run up there. I'll have to accept that 4-year cycle hasn't worked out, and see how it goes. Now, if it's on the 3rd of January that we see the collapse, I'm still going to call that the 4-year cycle. I'm sorry that it moved to the right by 4 days, but I think we can accept that. But if we really start to see us moving significantly into January, February, March, and we're still climbing, then I'll start to give a bit more credence to some of these other ones, which is fine. And we can have a look at how the rest of the world and the economic global picture is panning out. And trust me, he comes up with some really interesting data sets that I've not really seen anyone talking about, in terms of how unemployment isn't something we should be looking at for recessionary, but actually how we're paying overtime rather than taking on new employees and all of that kind of stuff. And it makes a lot of sense in terms of that. And And he doesn't think we're anywhere near a recession. Absolutely, the data is completely the other side of talking about a recession, whereas a lot of people have been saying we're in a recession, but without, it's one of these stealth ones. So, yeah, definitely worth having a look at there. Right, I think I've rumbled on about that enough. Next question. Choppy, in your opinion, which asset will see the most amount of gains over the next 4 to 5 months between Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana? And what would your price predictions be? I don't really like giving price predictions, but we'll have a look at those three. So here's the chart that I've created earlier. And what we've got Bitcoin in white, we've got Solana in purple, and then we've got Ethereum in yellow. And this is on the weekly time frame, and I've just done it as a line chart, but the data goes all the way back, you can't quite see it, to the beginning of 2021. And why have I done that? It's because I wanted to just try and get a feel for how these assets have moved. And it's arguably the three biggest assets out there. I appreciate by market cap, XRP and BNB are higher than Solana. But in terms of use, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, they're the big three. So not a bad choice to ultimately look at. So the question really is, next 4 to 5 months, let's just assume that what we're talking about there is into an alt season with a blow off top at some stage, but we're expecting end of cycle within that time. So is how much room is there still to go on all of these assets? And for me, the first thing to say is, well, no, I probably should have said it at the end, but I appreciate it. We'll start with Ethereum. We'll start with the one down at the bottom. So Ethereum for me, it has been a disappointment this cycle in terms of its performance. And let's not forget, if it wasn't for July this year, Ethereum was still lagging sub 3,000, hadn't cleared its all-time high from the previous cycle, and just ultimately had really struggled. Now, we have made a new all-time high. It's made a new all-time high by about $70. We found ourselves actually correcting back down. We're sitting around 4,000. And so, we haven't really, those of you that are holding alt and have held Ethereum since 2021, you felt no pain because you're pretty much back at the price you were ultimately when you bought it. But you've also felt no joy at the same time. Whereas Solana, yep, the line charts don't do it justice. Matter of fact, I actually wrote these down here because they're weekly lines. So it's on the opening closes and not the spikes. But Solana last cycle high was 260. It has broken its all-time high January of this year, just under 300. So again, a marginal kind of increase. But the interesting thing between Solana and Ethereum is the growth that we've seen of these assets during this cycle. So Ethereum got down to a low of just under $900. Interestingly, not at the market bottom. This was actually in June of 22. Market bottom November 22. Since then, it's made its way back up to just under 5,000. So we're probably talking around about 5.5x. Whereas you have a look at Solana, which I know got taken through the ringer because of FTX, but it got down to as low as $8. Okay? $8.07. It's low in December 22. And look at it, the high, just under $300. So 37x in this cycle already. Now roughly sitting still at around about 26x. And then we've got Bitcoin, which we know is slower to move, but ultimately, low this cycle bear market was 15,000, just over. We've hit 124,000, looking at anywhere from around an 8 to a 7.5x, depending on where you judge it from, even now, or market all-time high. So from those figures there, we can see that Ethereum is the one that has failed to spark the imagination. And why have I tried to stress that out there? Because you've kind of asked me, well, which one is going to perform best? And so far, obviously, Solana has performed the best, with Bitcoin coming second, much further down, and then Ethereum really picking up the bottom. But the best way to really try and understand it is for Ethereum and Solana to increase in unit price. Obviously their market cap has to go up, and I think that's the kind of thing that people sort of forget. Solana or Ethereum could easily 10x from here, and it's like, well, can it? because then it'd be worth $5 trillion. And that seems like an awful lot of money just to be flowing into Ethereum. And so I kind of look at it as, how can I accurately give a price? I can't, things can go absolutely crazy. Altseason could be unbelievable. But the best way for you to try and understand where things are going is just have a look at it from market cap. So the individual tokens market cap versus the overall market cap. So Ethereum at the moment is kind of sitting around about 20%. I mean, I'm doing some really rough maths here. And Solana is going to be, I don't know, around about 4% of market cap. No. I'm actually adding all that wrong because I'm doing it versus Bitcoin when I should be doing it versus the overall market cap, which is 3.9 trillion. Let's just quote 4 trillion for cash. So this is, what's this, 12%. And then Solana's just just under 3%. So for me, I just think that if I was to put my money anywhere, and I mentioned this about this seesaw not so long ago, I think now is probably the time you've missed the boat in investing in Bitcoin, especially if it's just for the next 4 to 5 months. So you really look at those other two assets. And for me, Solana, it has an already a smaller market cap, so it's got much bigger room to grow, but it also has the meme coin community behind it. I know there are meme coins on Ethereum, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them these days are getting done by a pump fund and Solana. So when that goes, we've got that use case for Solana to really help drive that one through. And so I can see a much larger explosive growth of Solana for the remainder of this cycle over Ethereum. Doesn't mean Ethereum isn't going to have an impact, but I just think when you're going to marry those out at the end, you'll see that Solana's had that room to grow. And just looking at the history of it, I mean, you can just see how sluggish Ethereum's been this cycle compared to Solana. And I just think that will continue. I'm not guaranteeing another 37x from here, absolutely not. But we've seen that this has been adopted far greater than Ethereum has this cycle. So ultimately, I believe that Solana is the one that I'd be going with. How high can it go? I mean, I'm sorry, that is just too hard to say. I think it'll make a new all-time high, $300 at least. But I really couldn't tell you, because ultimately that's going to be a question of how long's the cycle got left, how high can Bitcoin go, and then what is the fall off of Bitcoin's dominance going to be into altcoins. I think Solana, being one of the largest altcoins out there, I think it's going to feel a really good presence, going to get a real big uptick. But I also think it will manage to hold on to that when funds flow out of large cap altcoins into smaller ones, just because people are going to hold on to a bit of Solana just to transact with for meme coins and everything else there. So Solana would be the one for me if I had to put my hat on it. Have another quick drink and then we'll have a look at Bijan's question. Sorry, joining late. I saw the poll. Could someone update me on what Harry's thoughts are with Simon's thesis? So I'm Dawich. I will just very quickly. I'm still going with 4-year cycle Q 2024, 2025. Sorry, Q4 2025. Understanding Simon's view that we're going to have an elongated cycle, probably looking at the first half of 2026. As we see the rate cuts come back down and the market move. I will just stand, as I said, and sorry for everyone that's already heard this, it just be, until we see the 4-year cycle break, that is what has worked. And it's not just a Bitcoin 4-year cycle, it's the 4-year debt cycle that the whole of the global markets are working towards. Doesn't mean that it won't break, obviously, because nothing is infallible. But I feel that I'm positioned on the right side of it if it does break, because things are just going to move to the left. And I am not on a date-driven exit. I think we will find an exit or find a top in Q4 of 2025. I may not, even if we do find the top in Q4 of 2025, I still may not exit, even with my best intentions, until Q1 of 2026, just because my indicators to get out may not hit until then. And so that might work out far better for those that think it's going to be a little bit later than I do. But I'm more than happy to keep on evaluating that data and go. but I just feel that there will be an event that will drive us that price to a blow off top. I do think we are going to see a nice run up through Q4 of this year, but we will see some exhaustion. I don't know how that's going to affect altcoins, I'll be honest with you. But I'm still hoping, as much as everyone else, that altcoins sees that run. So that's where it is. So Bijan has asked me for a couple of weeks now, and I've put it off, to talk about the Wyckoff pattern he has been mentioning with BitTensor. So that's what we're going to do. I'm not going to actually go into a lot of theory behind Wyckoff, because I did a whole video on it. I mean, for the OGs, you'll remember this. 24th of Jan 2023. This was actually the last the last video I did on Zoom before giving up because it was so crap for me and moving on to YouTube. So that's how long ago it was. But if you go into that video there and you go about an hour 24 in, it's back when we used to talk for ages, I start talking about Wyckoff. Actually, it's about an hour and 20. Start talking about sort of Wyckoff, the theory behind it, and everything else. So I talk about the theory for about 10-15 minutes. Better than me regurgitating it now. I'll put a link in the Avenger chat if anyone is interested in it, if I can convince you in my next 5 minutes of that. I've got another sort of guide here that we will refer to some terms within, but I'm not going to necessarily go into the cycle as such. One thing I did find, and by the way, again, for the OGs, I've gone back to the white charts that we used to do back then. I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with them, but I will. So just for those that had a look on here, so we were talking about this at the bottom of the bear market in 2022 into 2023. And the question was whether or not we were seeing a Wyckoff accumulation phase, and ultimately that's going to lead to a markup. So you got 4 phases in Wyckoff. You have an accumulation phase in which obviously the asset is being accumulated through moves within that accumulation phase and sort of hype around it. You then get what's the second phase, which is a markup. So price then moves up. Then that gets into a distribution phase, which is basically a lot of hype around it, but actually the market makers are selling at that time. And then you get the markdown phase, which is basically strong move down as market makers are trying to drive the price lower so that they can get back into an accumulation phase whilst everyone is fearful and start buying the asset back up. And we were wondering, we were down at 15,000. We'd had a hell of a year 2022, but we were kind of ranging a little bit, and there was people talking about it was working quite nicely with all the different levels within Wyckoff. Interestingly though, so this is the screenshot I did from that, and I've kind of reenacted it on here. I thought I'd actually put the terms on. I must have done them in the white and not changed it. But anyway, you can kind of see how that's played out. And this is where it is. And I'd sort of given 3 scenarios. Basically, you crash back down, it's not a thing, or we're going to see either a strong move up or a more gradual move up. And you know what? I mean, we never readdress this after doing it. But if we exit, and then we find out where we were, to be fair, it actually worked out quite nicely. I mean, we came back down here, we came up, we retested, we didn't quite hit the conservative view. It was more of a sharp move out, consolidate, and then we went off to the races, and it actually worked out quite well. I don't know. So to be fair to whoever it was that pointed us out on that one, we should have tracked that a little bit better. But I was just showing that just before we get into talking about BitTensor, because at least it does show it there. In terms of the BitTensor, I don't remember which one I did it on now. Right, here we go. So, that's a bit messy, don't worry. This is a screenshot of what Bijan sent. I don't know if Bijan's here, I think he was. I think he is. So effectively, this is BitTensor's price on the weekly time frame. I think this might be daily, mine's weekly. But what we're actually seeing, if this is led to believe, you are watching good, is that BitTensor is currently in a distribution phase of the Wyckoff pattern, which unfortunately, if that is true, is actually a phase in which hype has already been driven into the market, and we're now seeing market makers moving up. So, at some stage in this section here, we've put out an accumulation phase. We've then had that markup. We're then in this distribution phase. And the point that Bijan was trying to make is once that distribution phase has ended, the next move for Wyckoff is a move back down, and a strong move back down. So that's kind of where things were ultimately going. In terms of some of the terms that are on here, I put them on another chart. You can kind of see whoever did draw this out. It's kind of shown the actual, how can I phrase this? The theory behind price movement. It doesn't have to be exactly like this on the Wyckoff pattern, and then how that they've interpreted this on here. Again, it's very much, and this is a distribution phase. So, we've got preliminary supply and then buying climax. That's basically where the end of the accumulation, so the markup phase, where it's an absolute frenzy. Everywhere man his dog is talking about it. Then we start to see some natural reactions and selling come back down, setting an area of weakness, a low point. And then we range a little bit. So we have these like sort of, well, they call them up thrust, but these retests of support where we try and trap more liquidity in there as the actual market makers are selling in this period. And then we get to sort of the back end, and this has to run with volume as well. We start to see that volume's getting a little bit exhausted here. Last point of supply, we get one final move up. The market makers have sold everything they need to sell. The next thing that they're going to do is bring in volume, but selling volume, and sort of move this price all the way back down. We lose our sign of weakness level. We maybe retest a little bit, but then we just move to the phase down. Right. Well, I've drawn that on here, and it looks a little bit like, oops, why did that not disappear? Delete that. I want to get rid of it. There we go. So I've kind of tried to interpret what Bijan has put on this one, just so we can see it a little bit better. And let me know if you actually prefer the white. I don't think I can do it for one, but I do kind of like it, but it just feels a lot cleaner, to be honest. But we've had, as I say, that accumulation phase on the right-hand side behind my head, which you can't actually see. This markup into a preliminary supply, a natural pullback, a buying climax, which happened to tie in with the Binance listing. Then we have the natural reaction of people selling after the Binance listing before a secondary test. Then a big sell-off through sort of summer 2024 into this sign of weakness as it is, but we get those reversals. Some moves back up, these up thrusts, but notice how as it comes back down, it retests on levels of previous support. So this preliminary supply level is this blue line. The retests come back down onto it. We kind of lose it a bit, but retest it. Come back down and retest this sign of weakness. Back up again into another area of support, which was the Gandalf level where we find ourselves at the moment. And what Bijan is ultimately alluding to is, right, at some stage we're going to find itself out. And there's no guarantee of how long a Wyckoff accumulation or distribution phase is. But what he was saying is if this is a genuine distribution phase, then we should see a sharp move down. And actually, we probably should see at least testing this sign of weakness down at sort of 162. Maybe then getting a bounce back down, but not clearing, we'll call it the Gandalf line, but where this support is here. Again, this could be anywhere. We don't know at the moment. And then we're going to see it fall all the way back down. How far down it goes, no idea. Now, what do I think about that? For me, I suppose we don't know. That's as good a point as I can say. There are elements in there which I accept do look like a Wyckoff distribution. I suppose for me, there's two things. One, firstly, we're just meandering at the moment. We haven't lost this level as much as we think we may lose. This sort of 300, 289 for this wick down here, however you want to look at it level. We haven't at the moment. We've managed to stay strong. And as long as we do, fine. I would like, as if we do, to start making some all-time highs. Until we do that, then I agree that there's an argument to be made that we might just be in another, continuing the distribution phase before it sells off. But the real test, unfortunately, is going to be if we lose this level, how far down do we go? If we go down to sort of this 162 level, and it doesn't have to be exact, but if we get down to this level, see a bounce, and then that bounce fails to get us above, say, the Gandalf line, I think the reality is we maybe are at the back end of a Wyckoff distribution. It doesn't mean it goes all the way back down to the previous accumulation level. They might find the accumulation level sort of around about the 100s, whatever. It does, there's no set distance anything has to fall, but it is something that unfortunately we are going to have to just keep our eyes on. I thought I had volume on here. See if I can grab it up. Just over there. Volume. The other thing with the volume is very light back in 2024. Obviously, there were only a few exchanges back then, but even when the Binance listing, it's not seen anywhere near the volume that we've seen over the past sort of 12 months. But you can see that the volume has been falling away. That's not deniable. We start to see a red candle here with a large volume spike, then again, we might be seeing some aggressive move back down. So that's one way to ultimately look at it. But what I would say is there another way of looking at it? If I can, are we actually in an accumulation phase? Hear me out here. I'm just going to hide volume for now because it's just bugging me. So this is on the daily time frame. So have we, we've had this fall from the beginning of the year, December time. And we've kind of made these moves down, preliminary support, retest back up, selling climax right down in April of 2025 when the tariffs were announced. Natural rally back up before coming back down for secondary tests. Again, all elements within the Wyckoff accumulation phase. Clear tests there. And we're kind of still at one of those test zones. Now, for an accumulation phase, what needs to happen is we need to see a spring. Okay. Now, unfortunately, the spring really should be ever so slightly below the selling climax, to really produce max fear, and then they reverse it through. Doesn't that necessarily have to be, especially if you're working off volume there. But, we could see that. But could we just see it losing this Gandalf level, maybe coming back down, testing sort of 230 or something like that? What's happened? And then we see sign of strength, last point of support, coming back, retesting, say, on some of these previous highs, and then it's moved up to Valhalla early next year. And so, you're kind of stuck. Well, we're weekly time frame. There's an argument to be said that we're in a distribution phase, but in a daily time frame, I think there's another equally as strong argument to suggest that we're actually in an accumulation phase. And you take something like the fact that where we are in a cycle, the fact that altcoins are being stifled at the moment, the fact that BitTens are just, for whatever reason, just doesn't seem to be doing the same as what altcoins are doing. And you kind of wonder, does the narrative more suggest that actually this is an accumulation phase? Market makers are trying to get their bags as much as they can, and they're doing whatever they can to suppress the price, to keep the price low, trying to just sort of whittle the weak-handed out, and then they're going to make that move. And I agree that there is an argument for that. And I would argue, unless we see some sharp moves back down, sort of taking out some of these levels like 168, then we're more than likely in an accumulation phase, particularly when you tie that into the narrative of where we are in the overall crypto cycle. Now, that doesn't mean, unfortunately, that we're going to get to 3,000. There's no guarantee of that at all. All we can comfortably assume is that we'll make an all-time high on that way up, on that sort of uptick. So I sort of probably gravitate more to this one, just with where we sit within the cycle, although I accept, and of course, and I feel that's the weekly time frame, although I accept that there is a relatively compelling argument for this. But again, we're just at a stage in the price where it's not giving us any additional data right now. We need that sharp move. Sadly, actually, we need that sharp move in the same direction, whether it's distribution or accumulation. Because for the accumulation, we want it to drop so that we can get the traps in and spring off it. And then for the distribution, we just need that sharp drop with volume to drive the price back down. So that's currently where I sit with it, Bijan. I don't know if that helps You've got all-time highs will definitely break the Wyckoff pattern. I think Alan highlighted the low volume and tower Binance compared to the other top 60 alts. But I just don't know, I don't know how well BitTensor is trading on Binance. I mean, nobody in the UK can buy it because it came out after we changed our rules. Similarly, with those in the United States, they were already probably used to Mexi, KuCoin, and others. And so I think for me, I'd like to see what the data is of just general volume. And I did say to Alan when he's watching, if he just what he wants to probably do, in case he let's have a look, is go on to CoinMarketCap and have a look at the historic data. And you can do sort of last closing price of the day or the opening, whatever you want, plus the volume of the day, as in the trading volume. And you can do some sort of work out how many actual TAU were traded on each of those days to give you an idea of how much is it moving up and down. Maybe that might give you a bit of a better idea, because obviously, as you'd expect, if you went down far enough, if you were looking at it from when it was back at $700, these figures are going to be far higher. But 350, 200 million. We go to the last time it was 350. It's trying to find 350 here. It's only 124 million. So obviously, it was a lot less traded on that particular day. So I think there's some sort of correlation that maybe you should have a look at there, which I have told him to do. So anyway, just my views on those there. Let's get into the final bit. We've been rattling on, skimming on the longer ones. Let's have a look at some actual charting. I will keep this short and sweet, he says. I can spill water all down myself. Okay, Bitcoin back above 114,300 at the moment. That candle's looking pretty nice, to be fair. What have we had? Daily time frame. Prices come back down, as I mentioned, alluded to earlier. We have made a bottoming pattern. Right hand side of that bottoming pattern higher than the left hand side. What we want to see. Vector candle, we talked about on Friday. That vector candle, I said it will absolutely get recovered. It has already been recovered. It was recovered yesterday, and we're looking into recovering this other vector candle right now. We need to get to 115,000 to close that one. I mean, the move up to the 50 EMA, beyond it, pulling back down within the 50 EMA cloud, 10, 20 EMA, looking like a pretty nice candle at the moment. It's definitely some buying volume in and around those levels. I'm thinking making us make that move back up. And then, if nothing else, I mean, we only talked about it last week. New moon cycle down into this. We've only got until, it should be, I think I've done this, there we go. So it's 14 and a half days, if you remember, or a little bit, 14.75. So 15 days time. Monday the 6th, we're expecting a new moon at some stage, full moon, sorry. Full moons could well be taking us that move back up. I actually think it's, bull moon, full moon for the move back up. Maybe just that continuation there. So if that's the case, we may only have to wait a week or so, or just under, and then we'll get another sort of impetus and a push up. If you want to buy into the moon cycle theory, just thought I'd throw it in there from last week. Dropping it onto lower time frames. Let me just get rid of that. Also, what I was alluding to, so I have marked off two vector zones that I think maybe you want to keep an eye on for. So we've got this one at 101,000, and we've got the other one at 23,000, should we say? And we're just in that range. We've been within that range now for the best part of 3 months, and these are kind of our markers. We break below 101,000. By the time we get below that, we are going to be hitting the 50 EMA. The 50 EMA on the weekly time frame at the moment is at 99,000. So I think this is a nice little back marker to be having a look at. The fact that it's also backed up with a vector candle, it's just decided, you know what, I'm going to mark it on my screen. And then I've marked this one on here because if we are getting the momentum we need from this move up, this is what we need to challenge, isn't it? I mean, obviously it sounds obvious, but that is what we've got to get above to make, one, a new all-time high, but to recover that. And I'll stand by it. Vector candles don't normally last very long within this range, even on the daily time frame. So except for the one that caused it at the very beginning, all other vector candles have been collected, bar the one we're eating into right now, I accept, and the one from the all-time high. So certainly something to have a look at. We go down to the 4-hour time frame. Let's just get rid of that. Okay. So again, this was this bottoming pattern, if you will, that we kind of had over the weekend. We've had that move up. We have had vector candles, so we are leaving some remnants behind us, of course. What I would sort of like to see is, give a pen out. Here was an area that I was hoping we were going to break. We managed to break through this little shoulder beforehand with a vector candle. We've come back up, and then we've come back and we've retested it. And then we found strength again off the 200 EMA. So yeah, that's fine. You know, that's what we want. It's always what we want in market moves, isn't it? We want moves up, retest, moves back up. So nothing wrong with that move today. Tying in with a 210 EMA, fine. I'd accept we got vector candles there, but as we get on lower time frames, some of them do hang around a little bit longer. Anita Raoul came up with a 4.5-year cycle because he said the debt was rolled over from 2021 for 5.4 years because of interest rates. So he did go on to talk about how they were able to refinance that, but was it for actual 5.4 years? I'll have another look, but thanks for bringing that to my attention. I will check it out. Back to Bitcoin. So, you know, for me, we've got that strength there. This red vector candle is the previous one from the daily time frame, which I think we are just nicely making that move up to on that one there. We go down to the hourly. The only thing I would say is, you know, we've got to keep finding that growth. We've got to close above sort of that 114,100. Otherwise, someone might want to draw double top there on the hourly time frame, which we don't really want to see. But again, even getting rid of those, I don't know what the short key is for back. Can't anyway. Just get rid of some of these. I don't want to delete all my drawings. That's why I'm doing it one at a time. But you can kind of see, even on the hourly, back to the 50 and then bounce from it. What you want to see. So yeah, everything's looking pretty good for Bitcoin. And again, moving into October. So that's happy days. BitTensor, yeah, we're looking sad, aren't we? Gandalf is feeling pretty lonely. We've come down. I mean, you can't see that the 800 EMA is the Gandalf line. So this move up, rejecting off the 10, the Gandalf line, and the 800 EMA, we have been rejected from that. I will say that there is some support. You know, we've had 4 or 5 candles sort of closing in around this region at the moment, and it is sort of tying in with this side here. We just got to make sure that we don't close below 287. That, you know, it's a different story when we close below there. Wick down to it, fine. Just don't want to be closing below that. So I think that's a level to support. I'd hate to call it the new Gandalf level, but yeah, that's it. But the battle, and I get why, you know, we have to talk about it. You know, once we do clear the 315, we've still got quite a lot of work to do, whether it be trying to end this series of lower high after lower high, or just work our way through the 50, the 20, the 10, the 50, the 20, the 50, and the 200 EMA. I mean, the 200 EMA we now have to break the cycle of the lower highs. So yeah, bit of work to do. We've not done that in over a month, and we only really did it because we've just gone sideways in this range. But I will stand by what I said on the first chart. You know, make a rash decision at this level at your peril, because when you look at it from this point of view, you know, we've got some pretty good touch points from here which have seen moves. You know, green vector candle move up to start the move, come back down, red and green vector candles move, takes us back up. So we just need to see some strength, some volume to come back through, take these out. There is a vector candle to be taken, 320 to 335. And I tell you what, actually, I think there's maybe a question to be had about if we can't break that, is there another opportunity? Try and do a side step there. I don't know if the 4 hours is going to tell us anything sort of different or groundbreaking, not necessarily. Just that, you know, the 10 EMA has beaten us up, and when we thought we'd managed to break it, the 50 EMA has just come along and said, no, not today. So we have had a retest of the 50 EMA. It's been a while. You know, it's been sort of best part of 2 weeks since we've had one of those on the 4 hour. Maybe we're sort of seeing some sort of rounding bottoming pattern here that we can kind of get some hope from, whether there's some actual bottoms down here. But again, you know, these vectors, we are seeing the moves up, but what we always want to see is the vector through the 50 EMA, which we just haven't seen on the 4 hour. Let's see if there's anything on the 1 hour to try and give us a bit more hope. I mean, there's some here, but you know, any hope that you had from there, we've lost because we just recovered those vector candles straight away. But we have maybe another try at this. Yeah, this was a move, and then we'll consolidate this for the next move. It's getting pretty messy on the lower time frames, and a lot of stuff on that. Ethereum daily. Okay, moved down, retested. So that this white line here, 3943, was the local, this cycle's high points that we were battling against for some time. We come back down, we've retested it. Fine, you know, we lost the 50 EMA. We come back to a natural level of support. We've bounced from it. Next couple of days, make or break. Come on, let's take this vector candle here. We are seeing some strength. We've already recovered one vector candle. Can we take this one? We start having a conversation about 4,500 and sort of that move through there, or at least back into the range. The other levels to look at, I suppose, is going to be that 200 EMA. I marked it before here at 3.3. It's now at 3.5, but it's still within this range down here. So something to look for there. But I'll stand by. Ethereum had a strong move. We were going to expect some sort of pullback. We're hoping the 50 EMA was going to catch it. It hasn't. And so we're just waiting to see where it goes from. In terms of on the 4-hour time frame, kind of not the worst picture, I suppose, because we have broken through the 50 EMA. We're coming back and we're consolidating on it at the moment. We just need that move. You know, that's it. And there's plenty to be had at that level. So there's plenty of reason for the market makers to want it to go through there. But likewise, there's a little bit more back down for a retest there. But I just think it's going to go on an overall sentiment within it. And if we have a look at dominance now on the daily time frame. So we had the waterfall. We've come back, another waterfall. We've 800 EMA. We've bounced nicely from that. We've attacked the 50 EMA. We've rejected from it. We're attacking it again right now. You know, we want to see that roll over, and that's going to help Bitcoin, help Ethereum. But we actually need it to break this level. We need to break 57.40. We can start really seeing an alt season attacking that 55 down at the bottom. What I would just say, if we get rid of some of those, if I just put it on, what am I supposed to be? I think I'm on the wrong chart, that's fine. This one, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Ethereum BTC, sorry, I was on the dominance chart still. So this was this trend line that we've sort of drawn. Oops. On Friday we were talking about, it's fine. We break it, we've re-attacked it, we've actually now gone and lost it. Now, you could argue that this line may get a bit tighter and we're still on it. So I'll give it the benefit of the doubt of us trying to get it a little bit tighter there. But we really are at a point where, decision needs to be made. I just feel that for me, with Bitcoin dominance climbing back up, seeing some sort of bottoming pattern here, I can see it trying to go to 60. I can see it trying to retake that, and the impact that that's going to probably have on ETH BTC is ultimately, unfortunately, that move back down. Now, I think it'd go beyond this 50 EMA. I think we'd probably be looking at trying to retake some of this vector candle here. Doesn't mean that that's it for alt season. It just means we may be entering into a period where Bitcoin just sort of takes center stage as we go into October and that movement there. So just be watching that as we go through it. In terms of total 3 minus USDT against ETH, and that's against ETH. I was hoping it was against Bitcoin. I've got one here against Bitcoin. It's total 2 minus USDT. Kind of see that the alt market. It's not made that move yet. We had a move up, but we failed to clear this level here. We're starting to roll now. We need it to bounce, really. Roll and bounce. Don't lose that 50 EMA. In terms of other things, I think we're probably there or thereabouts. I mean, Nasdaq still making all-time highs. S&P still making all-time highs. Gold still making all-time highs. Silver still on its approach to retake its all-time high of 50. So that, so there's still, some strength within those markets, and Bitcoin's potentially just lagging. Again, go back onto this. Paul, he actually talks about why it's lagging, and there's some interesting things within there. I'll let you watch it to interpret it. But for those that are worrying why we're not seeing ourselves catch up with the move that gold and the Nasdaq are taking, there may be some reasoning behind some of that. Anyway, I'm conscious that we are a good 80 minutes into this one, much longer than we normally do. So I'm going to probably just knock it on the head there. For those that did the poll, thank you. Let's just end that and have a look, see where we currently sit. It's pretty much 50-50, I suppose. 9% already peak, and then the rest kind of split between this year or the beginning of next year. I mean, you could argue there's a bit of a cop out there of just a sort of 6-month open block. Yeah, so I'll knock it on the head there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. As usual, we will have a trading pub on Thursday afternoon, so details will come out for that. It'd be remiss of me not to say, hope you can sign on to, it's not called the Cuddle anymore, I think it's the AI and Crypto Conference or whatever it is, but the event, the Christmas party in end of November. It'd be good to see people there, and it is open to the public, so get your free place now. I will do another charting on Friday, just see where we are from the week, and also see how things are played out with the US government. I mean, they're talking about we're not even going to get some data any this week. Bit of a cop out there because they're so worried about it closing. So how that affects the markets, we'll see. But more importantly, tomorrow starts October. So, the slog is over, apparently, and we can start rubbing our hands together and opening up our portfolios. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. I will speak to you all soon, and thanks for listening. Cheers now.